If you think you know what animals normally do, this video is here to ruin that. Because out on real trails, real islands, and real reefs, wildlife keeps producing moments that feel like a prank, until you check the field notes. We'll go from salt-starved mountain goats that stalk humans for minerals, to orcas wearing salmon-like headgear, to crows timing their snack routine with pedestrian lights. We'll meet monkeys that weaponize millipedes as bug spray and social insects that turn their own bodies into emergency weapons. Nothing here is folklore, it's all rooted in observations and research. I'll show you the footage or the reports, give you the context and explain the biology behind each one. In the cold waters of Washington State's Puget Sound, the southern resident killer whales live on a very serious diet: salmon, salmon and more salmon. Which is why, in 1987, researchers and whale watchers did a double take when some of these orcas started cruising around with a dead salmon balanced on their foreheads like a fishy beret. It wasn't a one-off accident either. People watching the population reported the behavior spreading to multiple individuals, the classic signature of something socially learned. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, the look faded away, gone by the following year, like the ocean briefly tried out an 80s haircut and immediately regretted it. Fast forward nearly 4 decades, in autumn 2024, observers spotted orcas in Puget Sound again, and the salmon hats were apparently back. Photos and reports from whale watch networks around places like Point No Point helped push the story from rumor to okay, that's definitely a fish on a whale's head. Scientists love a neat adaptive explanation, but the honest answer here is, nobody knows, and that's part of what makes it such a perfect story. One hypothesis is simple play: orcas are smart, social, and they mess with objects, including food, long after they could have eaten it. Another idea is food abundance behavior. If salmon are plentiful, you can afford to treat dinner like a toy, or like a wearable accessory. Others have suggested it could be a form of display or even a weird kind of temporary storage while traveling. And there's an important caution from experts: a couple of modern sightings don't automatically mean a full-blown revived fad yet. 1987 looked like a true trend across pods, the new wave may be more sporadic. So for now, salmon hats sit in that glorious scientific category of well-documented, deeply unserious, and still unsolved, proof that even apex predators sometimes wake up and choose accessories. Imagine hiking above the tree line in Washington's Olympic Mountains, thinking the weirdest thing you'll face today is your own blisters. Then a white, shaggy mountain goat steps onto the trail and stares at you like you're holding a sports drink it already paid for. Here's the twist: this species isn't native to the Olympics. Mountain goats were introduced here in the 1920 years, initially in small numbers, largely to create a huntable trophy population. The problem is that the Olympic high country doesn't offer many natural mineral licks, and mountain goats still need salts and minerals to keep their bodies running, nerves firing, digestion working, bones growing, all the unglamorous chemistry that makes being alive possible. So the goats did what evolution encourages: they looked around for the most reliable, mobile source of salt in the landscape, and decided it was hikers. Sweaty clothes, backpack straps, and even cooking wastewater suddenly became a buffet. And yes, the spot you duck behind a boulder to pee. To a salt-starved goat, that's basically a freshly opened electrolyte drink someone left uncapped. They'll hang around, follow people, and even paw and dig at the ground where someone urinated, patient, focused, and just creepy enough that you start checking behind your shoulder like you owe them money. It's funny right up until you remember the horns. Once wild animals lose their fear of humans, awkward mineral supplement can turn into "you are now in my personal space." In fact, in 2010, a park visitor was fatally gored by a mountain goat. That's one reason the park ultimately moved toward removing and relocating goats. Along with the damage they caused to fragile alpine ecosystems, they were also turning popular trails into salty human-goat meeting points. So yes, a human introduction, a mineral-poor mountain range, and suddenly you're being low-key stalked for your pee. Nature isn't judging you, if anything, the goat is judging the Olympics for not providing enough sodium. In a Japanese city, famously Sendai, crows and humans line up at a pedestrian crossing like they're all late for the same appointment. But the crows aren't waiting to cross, they're waiting for the perfect moment to deploy a walnut. The problem is simple, local walnuts are tough, and a crow's beak isn't a bolt cutter, so these birds have long relied on drop it on something hard as a DIY nut opening strategy. Then, around the early 90s, some Japanese crows figured out a better tool, cars. Here's the routine: when the light halts traffic, a crow hops down, places a walnut right where a tire will pass, and casually steps back to the curb like it's clocking in for a shift. When the light changes and vehicles roll forward, the walnut gets crushed, instant access to the good part. Then, when it's safe again, the crow strolls out with the humans and collects the pieces like a tiny black-suited commuter picking up a lunch order. Observers even report the trick spreading beyond the original group over time, which makes the whole thing feel less like a one-bird fluke and more like urban culture. It's tempting to say they understand traffic laws, but you don't need a driver's license to notice patterns. Red light means stopped cars, and stopped cars mean a predictable, safer workspace. The result is one of the cleanest examples of city animal intelligence, not magic, not myth, just a bird that looked at human infrastructure and thought, nice machine. I'll use it. You pull into a car park in New Zealand's South Island, shut the door on your rental, and think, perfect, 10 minutes of peace and mountains. Then you hear it, a harsh, mischievous screech, like a bicycle brake with opinions. Out waddles a Kia, New Zealand's infamous troublemaker parrot, nicknamed the clown of the mountains, and one of the only parrots on Earth built to live in alpine conditions, even through winter. It's not here to pose for your Instagram. It's here to audit your vehicle's build quality. Kia are built for prying and investigating, strong curved beaks, clever feet, and a brain that treats every new object like an urgent mystery. That curiosity is a real part of why they're studied so much, and also why they're so good at turning human stuff into toys. So when humans introduce a shiny metal box covered in textured parts, rubber, seals, wipers, antennae, the Kia's brain lights up like, finally, a puzzle worthy of me. They hop onto the bonnet, grip the wiper blade, and start peeling rubber the way a bored kid peels string cheese, except the kid has a can opener beak. And it doesn't stop at wipers, they're notorious for ripping at rubber door and window seals too, turning quick photo stop into why is my car drafty now. The funniest part is their vibe, zero haste, full confidence, like they're performing routine maintenance and you're the one being unreasonable for wanting intact window seals. It's not spite, it's object play and relentless exploration. And it's exactly why conservation groups beg people not to feed Kia. Once they learn car parks equal snacks, they hang around longer, get bolder, and the adorable mountain clown phase can slide into highly trained vandal with wings. So yes, the Kia can be charismatic, brilliant, and endangered, and also the only animal that can make you miss the simpler days when your biggest travel problem was a flat tire. You're walking through the Australian bush, minding your own business, when you spot what looks like someone dropped a tiny stack of brownies on a rock. Except it's not brownies. It's wombat poop, neatly cube-shaped, like a marsupial has been doing geometry homework in secret. Wombats are solitary, territorial animals, and they deliberately leave droppings on rocks and logs as scent messages, basically the outback version of I live here. Cubes have a petty little advantage. Flat sides mean they don't roll off those display platforms, so the message stays put instead of tumbling into the dirt like a failed Instagram post. For a long time, people joked that wombats must have a square butt. They don't. The cube factory is inside the intestine, not at the exit. A key part of the story is that wombats digest slowly and squeeze out very dry, compact feces, excellent for holding shape. Then the biomechanics kicks in. Dissections and testing show the cubes are shaped in the last around 17% of the intestine, where the intestinal wall has alternating regions that are thicker and much stiffer. Those stiff and soft zones contract at different rates, sculpting flat faces and sharp corners in what is, frankly, the least dignified 3D printer ever built. And they make a lot of them. Reports describe wombats producing up to around 100 cubes a day, which means they're not just territorial, they're committed to the branding. So yes, wombats turned poop into stackable, non-rolling signage, proof that evolution can be both brilliant and deeply unserious at the same time. Deep in the neotropics, when the rainy season turns the forest into a 5-star buffet for mosquitoes, Capuchin monkeys don't just tolerate the bitey chaos, they get proactive. A wedge-capped capuchin spots a millipede, grabs it and starts a routine that looks like equal parts skin care and poor decision-making. First comes the activation. The monkey bites and mouths the millipede to coax out its defensive secretions. Researchers report lots of drooling and a strangely intense, trance-like focus. Then it is full-body application. The capuchin rubs the millipede along its fur, especially the back and flanks, sometimes rolling and scrubbing like it is trying to marinate itself in eau de bug off. Chemical analyses of the millipede secretion found benzoquinones, compounds known to repel insects, so the weird deodorant angle is funny, but it is also solid chemistry. The hypothesis is beautifully practical. By coating their fur, capuchins may reduce bites from mosquitoes and other pests when those pests are most relentless. And because capuchins are capuchins, it is not always a solo spa day. This can turn into a social event where multiple monkeys share the same millipede, like a communal roll-on at the world's worst gym locker room. From the millipede's perspective, this is an absolute betrayal. It evolved a leave me alone toxin, and the monkeys turned it into a premium personal care product. The best part is the logic. Humans invent mosquito repellent, forget to pack it, and suffer. Capuchins invent mosquito repellent, pack it in their hands, and rub it directly into their entire lifestyle. So yes, capuchins really do use millipedes like a pungent, chemical deodorant, except the goal is not smelling nice. It is not being eaten alive. Somewhere in the open ocean, a pod of dolphins drifts into what looks, at first glance, like a very questionable afterparty. In BBC footage, they gently nudge a pufferfish between them, taking turns mouthing it with the kind of careful curiosity you'd use to handle a spiky balloon full of do not touch. The documentary's narration famously suggests the dolphins might be deliberately microdosing the pufferfish's toxin to enter a trance-like state, because after a while they seem to float near the surface, oddly still, as if hypnotized. And yes, pufferfish defenses are no joke. Many species carry tetrodotoxin, a potent neurotoxin that can cause numbness and, in severe cases, paralysis. So the internet ran with it, dolphins getting high, passing a pufferfish like a joint, nature's cutest scandal. But here's the important buzzkill: several science writers and biologists have pushed back hard, arguing that the stone dolphin story is speculation piled on top of playful footage, and that tetrodotoxin doesn't even behave like a classic mind-altering drug. In other words, what looks like intoxication could just be dolphins doing dolphin things: social play, object passing, testing boundaries, and enjoying the world's worst stress ball. Still, the behavior is fascinating even without the headline. If you were going to risk a toxin, the way they handle the fish, brief, gentle contact, lots of passing, looks less like reckless partying and more like careful experimentation. Tiny poke, your turn, now mine, with the world's most expensive-looking poker face. So are dolphins drugging themselves? We honestly don't know. What we do know is that the scene perfectly captures dolphin culture, curiosity, teamwork, and a collective willingness to pick up the one creature in the ocean that comes labeled, in bold letters, may contains paralysis. High above the valleys of Europe, Africa and Asia, a huge raptor circles the cliffs looking like it escaped from a fantasy novel, the bearded vulture, aka the lammergeier. And the first thing you need to know is this: it's basically a professional skeleton eater. In many populations, bones make up roughly 70 to 90% of its diet. Meat is fine, sure, but marrow is the prize, and bones are a surprisingly rich food if you can actually process them. When a bone is too long to swallow, the bird flies up to a bone-breaking site and drops it onto rocks like it's doing aerial carpentry, then swoops down to inspect the result and repeats until it's bite-sized. To make this lifestyle work, it relies on extreme digestive chemistry. Studies describe a stomach built to generate a highly acidic environment, strong enough that even bone is on the menu. So far, that's already weirdly metal, but the lammergeier has a second hobby: cosmetics. As adults, both sexes deliberately seek out ferruginous pools and take long baths that stain their once whitish chest and face feathers a dramatic rusty orange red, like someone applied blush with a paint roller. For a while people hoped this was medicine. Maybe the iron oxides kill bacteria, protect feathers, or even help keep eggs safer in the nest. But experiments testing the antibacterial idea found no supporting evidence, which makes the whole thing even funnier. This bird may be doing it largely for status signaling and social display, a cliff-dwelling bone-eater that still cares about aesthetics. So the bearded vulture isn't just the animal that eats bones. It's the animal that eats bones, and then goes out to get itself looking fresh for the occasion. Picture a small patch of forest in Bosso, in Guinea, one of the most famous long-term chimpanzee field sites on Earth, where every individual is known and followed like a tiny soap opera cast. Bosso chimps aren't big on the classic hunt a monkey, share the meat routine. Mammal prey is relatively scarce there, and their predation history looks unusually low compared with other sites. Now add a creature that looks like a cross between a guinea pig and a small forest gremlin, the western tree hyrax, a nocturnal mammal that normally just clings to trees and screams like a haunted kazoo when bothered. On one January day, researchers heard chimpanzees screaming, rushed in, and watched a young tree hyrax tumble out of a tree, alive, stunned and having the worst possible luck. Instead of doing the obvious "this is food" thing, two adolescent males did what many teenage boys do when presented with something unfamiliar. They postured, charged, slapped the ground and even used a flexible sapling to whack the hyrax like a cautious, extremely overconfident science experiment. Then, they basically lost interest and moved on, leaving everyone to process what just happened. Years later, another episode got even weirder. An adolescent male briefly carried a live tree Hyrax, swung it around, and beat it against branches with what the researchers describe as a play face, while the adults kept calmly feeding like, "Children, please," inside voices. After the Hyrax was dropped and eventually appeared dead, an adolescent female took over, and this is where the story turns from bullying to unsettlingly tender. She carried the Hyrax around for hours, built a nest, brought it into the nest, groomed it repeatedly with her fingers and mouth, and slept with it for the night, not as dinner, but almost like an odd little doll. The next morning she was still grooming it, traveling with it, and generally behaving like she'd adopted the world's strangest stuffed animal, except this one was very real, and very dead. When the carcass was later examined, there was no sign the chimps had eaten it, no tasting, no meat focus, just minor lacerations consistent with rough handling. On a coral reef, two gorgeous, ribbon-like flatworms meet, and instead of a cute courtship dance, they initiate a duel that looks like synchronized origami having a breakdown. These species are simultaneous hermaphrodites, meaning each individual carries the equipment to play both sperm donor and egg producer. And that's where the problem starts. Being the mom is expensive, eggs cost resources, carrying them costs time, and it's hard to look glamorous while doing it. So both worms would prefer to act as the sperm donor, which is basically nature's way of setting up an argument. They everett sharp, extendable penises and start fencing, each trying to stab the other's body wall and inject sperm in a form of traumatic insemination. It's not romantic so much as, "Congratulations, you're pregnant now, because I touched you with my sword." The winner is the one who successfully delivers sperm while dodging getting tagged, because the loser may end up stuck with the costlier reproductive role. And this isn't some one-off freak show. In the tiny flatworm genus Macrostomum, researchers have found evidence that traumatic insemination has evolved repeatedly, with convergent shifts in reproductive anatomy and sperm design. In other words, evolution looked at mutual stabbing for parenthood and said, yes. Again. Several times. The funniest part is how this reframes sex education. In the flatworm world, the safest strategy isn't candles and consent, it's footwork, defense, and not getting punctured. So when you hear penis fencing, don't picture a dirty joke. Picture an arms race where the prize is, making the other guy do childcare. In the termite world, a colony isn't just a group, it's basically a single superorganism, and the individual bodies are highly replaceable. So when enemy ants breach the galleries, some termite soldiers don't fight harder, they detonate themselves. In the aptly nicknamed Kamikaze termite Globoterm sulphureus, soldiers can rupture specialized glands and spew a sticky defensive secretion that glues up attackers like living flypaper. It's called autophasis. The termite's body breaks open on purpose, turning one doomed soldier into an emergency chemical weapon. From the colony's perspective, it's coldly efficient. One sacrifice can block a tunnel, stall the invasion, and buy time for everyone else to escape or counterattack. And then there's the deluxe version, because nature loves upgrades. In Capuchin's Terracua, it's the older workers, the ones past peak foraging age, that develop bluish backpacks containing crystals and enzymes, essentially walking around with a chemical bomb vest. When a fight gets intense, they rupture, mixing separated components into a sticky, toxic cocktail that's far nastier than the normal defense fluid. The dark comedy is that the retirees are the ones most likely to blow up, so the colony is literally doing resource management. If anyone's exploding today, it's Bob. Bob has had a good run. It's altruism with brutal accounting, horrifying, brilliant and weirdly logical, because in termite society, the ultimate hero move is to turn yourself into glue. If you've ever watched a line of ants marching up a plant stem, you might assume they're hunting. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're heading to their farm, where the livestock is made of aphids. Aphids drink plant sap all day, and because sap is basically sugar water with homework, they excrete the excess as honeydew, a sweet syrup ants absolutely love. The ants don't just lick it off leaves like peasants, they milk aphids by stroking them with antennae, triggering a fresh drop like a tiny vending machine that accepts only massages. In exchange, ants act like bodyguards, they drive off predators, shelter the aphids, and even move them from dying plants to better pastures, because good employees protect the supply chain. Some ants take the commitment further. There are documented cases of ants keeping aphid eggs safe in the nest over winter, basically boarding the next season's herd until spring. So far it's mutualism, but the slavery vibe creeps in when you look at control. Researchers have shown ants can suppress aphid dispersal, they may physically remove wings, and they can also chemically interfere with the development of winged forms, because nothing says partnership like sabotaging your partner's ability to leave. And the relationship has an even darker footnote. If an aphid colony becomes too big or stops paying in honeydew, ants may switch from dairy farmer to protein investor and eat some of them. So on a single leaf you get a whole economy, sugar extraction, protection services, forced residency, and occasional restructuring. It's adorable right up until you realize you're watching organized agriculture, performed by insects the size of rice grains. On Scotland's Isle of Rum, you can watch red deer grazing peacefully and think, ah ye, nature's salad enthusiasts. And then, in certain spots and at certain times, the deer do something that feels like a glitch in the food web. They target Manx shearwater chicks and bite their heads off. Researchers have described deer selectively chewing on bone-rich parts, not because they've turned predator, but because bones are basically calcium and phosphorus packaging. One synthesis notes the timing. It happens during the period when near-fledging chicks are more exposed outside their burrows, meaning the colony briefly becomes a horrifying little convenience store. The best explanation isn't bloodlust, it's nutrition math. Herbivores can run short on key minerals, and one widespread workaround is osteophagy, chewing bones and antlers to top up minerals. Rum's seabird chick episodes sit on that same spectrum. Less I crave meat, more I crave what meat happens to contain. And it's not just one weird Scottish island story. In North Dakota, white-tailed deer were even video recorded removing and eating songbird nestlings at night, fast, deliberate, and leaving almost no evidence, like a silent, antlered burglar. So yes, deer are herbivores, but in the real world, they can occasionally behave like opportunists with hooves, because when the body wants minerals, it doesn't care that your public image is gentle forest vegetarian. In northern Australia's savannas, it's normal to see raptors circling the edge of a grass fire like they just got invited to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Fires flush out panicked insects, lizards, and small mammals, easy picks for black kites, whistling kites, and brown falcons. But then comes the claim that sounds like a myth you'd hear around a campfire: some of these birds don't just follow fire, they may spread it on purpose. A 2017 paper in the Journal of Ethnobiology compiled indigenous ecological knowledge and non-indigenous eyewitness reports describing firehawks picking up smoldering sticks in beaks or talons and dropping them into unburnt grass to start a fresh line of flames, basically, arson as a hunting strategy. The logic is brutally simple: new fire, new wave of fleeing prey, extended snack time. National Geographic wrote about long-standing accounts from indigenous communities in the Northern Territory describing birds carrying burning material to new locations, stories that go back generations. Now, the important adult supervision. This remains hard to prove in the strict caught-on-clear video, experimentally tested sense, and skeptics point out that fires create chaos. Birds could grab sticks accidentally, or drop them without intent. That's why the best way to frame it is, a well-documented set of reports, taken seriously enough to publish, but still awaiting the kind of evidence that shuts everyone up. Still, as a story it's perfect. Humans like to think fire is our exclusive thing, then Australia casually offers you a bird that might be running a mobile barbecue to make dinner sprint into the open. Even if the final verdict ends up being rare, opportunistic, and not always intentional, the fact that this idea won't die tells you something. Raptors are smart, observant, and absolutely willing to exploit our favorite destructive element. In the Australian bush, there's a mouse-sized marsupial called an antechinus that treats romance like a limited-time event, because it is. For just 2 to 3 weeks each year, the breeding season hits, and males basically go into one-shot, no respawns mode. Mating bouts can last 12 to 14 hours at a time, with lots of partners, because the whole system is built around brutal sperm competition. Cram a lifetime of reproduction into a tiny window and hope your genes win the raffle. And if you're wondering how they fit that schedule into a 24-hour day, they don't. Researchers measured males cutting sleep by more than 3 hours per day during the breeding period, basically running on pure hormones and terrible decisions. Those hormones are the dark punchline. During the mating season, males show huge rises in testosterone and cortisol, and the stress system can fail to shut itself off properly. The result is what scientists call the mating syndrome: immune collapse, infections, internal bleeding, your body falling apart while your priorities remain extremely focused. It's not for the good of the species in a noble sacrifice way, it's sexual selection with a stopwatch. Females synchronize breeding to match predictable food pulses, males respond by going all in on endurance and quantity. So yes, antechinus males literally trade sleep, health and survival for paternity, proof that evolution can produce strategies that are both brilliantly optimized and unbelievably unhinged.